Hello and welcome once again to our course on the organisation and structure of the Knights Templar Church. This is part number 4 and we are going to be talking today specifically about the structure of the church. Okay, so as I record this video, I'm in the unusual position, if you like, of being both Grand Master of the Priory and Senior Cleric in our church. So it wasn't planned that way. It just came about that I was willing to take on that particular role when it became vacant. So, in any event, I placed the role of Grand Master as a senior in importance to that of Senior Cleric. So I'm more than happy to take direction from other senior ministers in my role as cleric of the church as well. At this current stage, we don't have anyone else who is taking any other clerical role, so it's just me at the moment. So let's get on to a little bit more about the organisation of our church, shall we? In the last one, we talked about the structure of the Priory and the involvements of the Knights Templar of Solomon, I should say, in their important role that they play within both the church and the Priory. Now, today we're going to look at the clerical side, okay? So let's just look at a few general issues then. To begin with, let's start with the word cleric, shall we? I've chosen the word cleric for a designation for me. I don't like vicar. I certainly don't like priest. I most certainly don't like father, because I'm father to children, not to anybody else. So I am a cleric. That is it. So that's how you can refer to me, as being a cleric of the church. Now it might seem a bit of an old-fashioned word to most people, but like I say, it's just an easy way to sort of make distinctions between the two arms of the church, if you like. So being a cleric, it refers to parts which offer spiritual guidance through provision of sermons, perhaps, or devotional material, should we do that, a chaplaincy service, other services that we may get involved with later on. Now, as the church grows, I envisage the clerical input to have a greater influence on our work. And in doing what I mean by greater influence, I mean an influence on the public at large through evangelical outreach and maybe other gospel reading initiatives. So in lieu of expected future growth, it's vital that we have a basic structure which we can use in the coming months and years ahead. So what about the role of the clergy in the Knights Templar Church? Well, you've already had some pointers already that I've mentioned, but what I want to do is to remind you, and this is an important point, by the way. I need to make sure that everyone is aware that we are far from being a run-of-the-mill church. All right? The average church around the world has a pastor, a few elders, some deacons, and their efforts would be in their local community, possibly with some kind of supporting mission overseas, perhaps, or something like that. And there's nothing wrong with any of that. That's fine. However, we have a different remit altogether. Not altogether, but in ways. We're dedicated to a set of priorities that I've been mentioning these in each video, so I'm going to do it again. Okay, so bear with me. We're dedicated to priorities. That doesn't mean to say we ignore everything else, but we have priorities, things that we place of more importance than other things. And the priority number 1 is we are here firstly and foremostly to be a visible and audible proponent for Christ. Okay, number 1. Number 2, we are here to aid and assist all calls from our fellow brethren in Christ. Okay. Number 3 is to aid and assist where applicable to defend both brethren and those who are destitute and helpless, in whatever way that defence might come about. These are our primary roles, okay? And So whether we are Templars as soldiers or Templars as clerics, we're still following the same primary roles. Now, this has got to be different. This is different. The function of our church as a whole is different than the usual local church setup. So last time we talked about the Priory, like I said, which we could see as being the main way that we as Templars might interact with the world. However, we've also got to remember that we're in fact a church. Okay? So, and that means that while our knights and dames have their own variable understanding and experience of God's word and doctrines, they require spiritual guidance just the same as everyone else. So that's the main area of work of the clergy within the church. And we must not just focus on those engaged in the work of the Priory, because as you've probably noticed, that there are those people who want to train as knights, and so they are working specifically under the guidance within the remit of the Priory. Out of the Priory, hopefully, will come knights and dames, having finished their training. That's the focus of that. The church as a whole, it's like we have congregational members, don't we? Not everybody in congregation is going to be a knight or a dame. They could be if they wanted to, but invariably they won't be. Yeah, it's up to them. So we have that sort of situation, and we've got clergy as well. So we've got clergy, we've got congregational members, and we've got Knights Templar under the Priory. So that's kind of how it is. It seems a bit loose, doesn't it? But if you think about an ordinary church, for example, you've still got the pastor of a church, haven't you? You will have elders and deacons of the church. So that could formulate, if you like, roughly translate to being a priory in a way. And then you have congregational members who do various and sundry ministries, whatever they may do. So it's not that different fundamentally. Okay, so let's just try and keep it in context. Okay. Now, as clerics, we have a responsibility to all of God's children, no matter what their role. Now, I want to emphasize this because we cannot make judgments about people. Let's say one group says, well, I don't like him, he's a pain in the neck, blah, 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 he shouldn't be in our church. Well, I'm sorry, but everybody has a right to be in our church, providing they are teachable and they are willing to listen to instruction and listen to help and guidance, and we can see a change, and they don't cause disruption and blah blah blah, stuff like that. So that's basically that. So kind of keeping things like that in mind, because we've got to maintain high standards, Christian study standards, that is, as well, so that we can provide solid, sound biblical doctrine and support for our brethren wherever they may be in the world. Now, the role of senior cleric, in this case me, has special responsibility to what? I'm here, and it's a bit strange because there's two of me, okay? There's me and me, all right? If there were a separate Grand Master of the Priory, the church, the senior member of the church, would defer to decisions overall made for the benefit of church by the Grand Master. Now that might seem a little odd, but we as a military organisation can't have two leaders. Okay, there has to be one. Some would say, "Oh, that sounds a bit like a dictatorship." Well, it's not, because Grand Master and senior cleric, the Grand Master must heed the words of their senior cleric. And that's a stipulation, if you like. It's not a case of senior cleric says something and he ignores it. Okay? If that happens, then there's going to be trouble. And the trouble will come via other means, which we won't go into now. Okay? So we can't take these roles lightly, but we need to understand where they fit in the scheme of things for us in this church. Now, the Grand Master, we'll just mention him for a moment, he's got to understand that in all church matters, that advice from the senior cleric is vitally important and should always be received, is what I've been trying to say, with the most steadfast seriousness. So this doesn't give Grandmaster carte blanche, as they say. It does to some degree, but hopefully I've made that point. Now, while senior cleric only acts in an advisory capacity to the Grandmaster, those warnings of errant thinking or action on the part of, should it happen on the part of the Grandmaster, should serve cause for him to reevaluate. Well, he's not going to be allowed to go down a path that is ridiculous, because the church is set up with a council to make sure that everything is steered in the correct direction, and so things will come to pass. Now we're going to talk about extending the responsibilities of senior cleric in the next lecture on responsibilities, so we'll leave that for now. Let's just have a look at the way that the church is sort of organized. Okay, now first of all, we need to have an appointing process. You can't just say, oh, you'll do, yeah, come on, join in, sit down, take a pew, and you can take up that job and we'll elect you. No, sorry. Okay, all clerical appointments in the Knights Templar Church are based on, yes, successful ordination of the member in the real world. And this means that credentials for such appointments, for such ordination, they've got to be sent to the Grandmaster for verification. We need to see them. We're not just going to accept paper things that you've bought over the internet. That's not going to happen, I'm sorry. And only after successful and close scrutiny of credentials, qualifications, experience, and so on, will an appointment be bestowed by the Grandmaster in cooperation with senior cleric. So if it's going to be the, let's say we want an assistant to the cleric, the senior cleric, then that could be a deacon. Deacons are, that's their role essentially, we'll get to that in a bit, or whatever. But it has to be done by appointment with the full compliance and agreement of Grandmaster. But essentially the appointment is done by senior cleric. And basically the Grandmaster will sort of sign it off, so to speak. So then appointments are going to be ratified by the issuance of certificates from the church, so that they have an understanding of their own status. And essentially this means some kind of, what we need from them, from applicants, is some kind of seminarial training, which has got a graded structure and recognized and has a robust examination process. So that we're not asking for something that is out of this world. Every church requires people who are going to be in their structure of organization need to be qualified to do what they're doing, and qualifications require training. So that seems to be fairly obvious, doesn't it? So we're never going to accept those people who've gained ordination from an ordination factory, or somebody who says, yeah, you've done all of this work and there's a diploma. There you go. No, sorry, no can do. Our clerics will be fully trained, validated, and vetted. All right. So that's appointment process. Okay. Now, what positions are available within the church specifically? Let's just remember we're talking about the church. So they have their own individual respective duties. So let's just run through what they are. You need to know what they are. First thing is deacon. Basically, that comes from the Greek word diakonos, and the word essentially means servant, or in this case, it's regarded as servant of the church. Now, I'll say straight away, the position of deacon can be either ordained or not ordained. Okay, you can be essentially an elder, as such, an elder deacon. You don't have to be ordained for this role, and you can be male or female. So we'll make that clear right to the first. But essentially, it can be, if you decide to go follow an ordination path, then deacon would be your first ordained position. So there is essentially, I guess, a difference between ordained deacon and essentially elder type deacon. All right, in our church, the ordained deacon must be a male. Okay, we don't have female ordained deacons. Okay, you can be a deacon elder, but with certain stipulations. So the male female sort of thing, the caveat, the dividing line there is that women will not in our church have a position or where they are teaching and preaching to the church. This is in accordance with Scripture. Okay. That doesn't mean to say they can't have ministries and so on as deacons doing this, that, and the other. Of course, yeah, we welcome the ladies into all manner of different works within the church. So anyway, let's just stick with the plan. As a first level minister, the deacon will cater to and care for the general spiritual and physical well-being of the church. For us as an online organisation, that would probably be allocated within their own country or region, perhaps, depending on how many people we have. So this would include, but is not limited to, for example, things like local helps ministries. You could be, working within another local church, community, or in conjunction with other knights and dames in your region. It could be about evangelism, taking the gospel to the lost in whatever context. You could be doing that independently, or you can be doing it or assisting a minister in your local area. So we're talking about ministries externally, but you can also do these tasks internally as part of our church. So we could talk about different roles, about how to go about evangelism online at a different time, perhaps, but it can be done within the church, within our church. A deacon could also be involved in biblical direction. Now, the deacon is kind of like for spiritual matters, should be the first port of call. And so issues and questions about our faith and would be dealt with by the deacon. If they haven't got ready answers for what they have to say, then of course, if there's a more sort of a less straightforward answer to a particular question, then the deacon would then refer that person to the minister, in that case, me. They could be involved in administration. That could be their sole task, if they want. Responsibility for church administrative duties as they arise. Okay. Now, that could be internet-based or, I'm not going to go into great detail here. And essentially, they could specifically be there as the assistant to in my case, the senior cleric. Okay. Now, so that's at the deacon level, more or less let's just say on a national or regional basis. Next, then, is an archdeacon. Now, arch gives you, it's an old term, but it means overreaching. Okay, like an arch, basically, that reaches from one place to another. So the archdeacon is someone who fulfills some or all of those roles, whichever the ones they want, but their range is wider. They can have organizational input, shall we say, over the whole of the church, wherever that may be in the world. So those duties, are essentially usually in assistance to the senior clerical member of the church. Again, it's me, the minister. I call myself cleric earlier on, but we can use the word minister as well. Okay, so the archdeacon would have greater responsibility, wider ranging responsibilities. That doesn't mean to say that they have authoritative organization, but nevertheless, we would expect an archdeacon certainly to be an ordained minister. And at that point, of course, unfortunately, it has to be a male in that role. Now, of course, we get to the next essential level of the organization, and that is minister or cleric or senior, whatever. Yeah. So more training is required. Okay, because the position requires a certain amount of experience, certainly biblical knowledge, and all sorts of things. Then we need an extension of training. Now, an ordained deacon might be assigned the role of a minister, and that would be essentially a promotion, wouldn't it? Well, we would need to see a deacon stepping up with their training and providing the necessary extra training to show that they've done necessary extra training that will allow them to be at least looked at for that particular role. The minister is regarded as an elder of the church. Quite simply. What is an elder? Well, somebody who's older. Somebody who's, I'm being silly, sorry, but somebody who has got a lot more experience, wider experience of the Bible, long-term life as a Christian with much to offer. That is generally, isn't it, what elder people offer? And we need to acknowledge and respect the position of elder. Now, duties of minister, what are they up to? Well, there's quite a lot of stuff that we can get up to. We can, when I say the minister, we're talking about there is a next level. So this particular minister, the first level of minister essentially, is someone who we would expect to be working with some authority within their own country. Okay, so the senior minister within a certain country. Okay, now. So what kind of things would they do? Well, preparation and delivery of devotionals, sermons, providing spiritual guidance for all the church members in their area. Maybe they would do prayer group coordination, get involved in some evangelical outreach perhaps. They would be an officiant of the church, ordinances, Lord's Supper and baptism wherever possible. And obviously on the internet it's very difficult to find a river to dunk somebody in, or a bath or whatever. And also officiant for any other church related requirements. They need to be there for visitation, for funerals, anointing, for healing perhaps, and importantly spiritual warfare. So it's the all-encompassing role of a pastor, as most people would understand the term. It's about looking after, shepherding the flock, isn't it? Okay, so having a flock to shepherd, that's fine, and we have now a pastor who's looking after a particular area. As we grow, it would be nice if we could appoint a pastor or a minister in a number of different areas of the country, so that we have a sort of a delineation, if you like, of responsibility, and following much the same pattern that is biblical and that you will see in other organizations as well. There has to be a senior minister, an overseeing minister. Well, okay, it all depends on the circumstances. So what I'm doing here is I'm laying out pretty much the standard organizational structure that you might find in any other church. So the next level is bishop. All right, bishop. So what's the difference between a bishop and a minister? Well, a bishop, we can't say right now what the bishop will be responsible for. I've been saying that the minister could be looking after the spiritual welfare of members in a specific country. But what about the bishop? Well, the bishop would have responsibility for a greater area. So let's just say, for argument's sake, we haven't got anybody in France at the moment, but let's just say we've got a minister who's responsible for France. Well, France is part of Europe. So if we had a bishop, then that bishop might be responsible for Europe. So we could have a bishop for continents, one for Australia, one for Europe, one for the USA, so on like that, things like that. Okay, so there's the bishop. So what we're looking for in a bishop then? We're looking for a bishop. A bishop should have full seminary training, without a shadow of a doubt. They must be ordained, without a shadow of a doubt. But they also must have extensive experience of being a minister themselves, in real life perhaps. Yeah. So where you've got local training is required to a bishop level, well, if someone has attained that already, well, that will be recognised in conjunction with any existing qualifications. Doesn't mean to say that they're going to be appointed. Okay, we'll mention that in a minute. Hopefully we'll remember to talk about that. But we're doing all of this in line with biblical understanding of the role of bishop. All right, so he is essentially a church, overall church elder, and should always be recognized in line with the biblical requirements that you will see in, and have a look at, 1 Timothy 3 verses 1 to 7 and Titus chapter 1 verses 5 to 9. You can look those up. So bishop's responsibilities within the Knights Templar Church specifically is the spiritual oversight of all members within a designated area that is larger than that of a minister, whether they be clergy or whatever. Clergy, congregational members, Knights Templar, whatever. So they're an oversight for the ministers and deacons, essentially, within that designated area. Okay, so that's bishop. Lastly is archbishop. Well, I think you can see where we're going with that. I personally have not called myself archbishop. The previous occupant of this job did, and I find it quite sort of, it gives me a nasty taste in my mouth. And the reason I say that is simply because of my own personal level of experience of being a minister. So I'm not going to appoint myself archbishop. That's not my job. It's only as the church grows, and if someone else with a greater understanding, more experience, and someone comes along, we can consider putting them in that position. That's not going to upset me. I'm happy to have more people involved. And if someone's got more experience than me, I bow to that experience. Isn't that the way it's supposed to be? So, Archbishop then, as the name implies, he's an elder whose primary role is the oversight for spiritual direction for the whole church. And there's quite a bit of managerial responsibility in that as well, as I already know, with regards to the clergy of the church. So he has a secondary role. Now, do you remember I told you about the senior cleric? Well, that's my position at the moment, but the archbishop is the senior cleric. That's it, the senior cleric. So his secondary role, as I said earlier on, is as advisor to the Grand Master on all spiritual matters to do with the church, not military structure, not structural. How the knights are organized within the Knights of Solomon, that is their responsibility. However, spiritual matters would be the Archbishop's responsibility. Like I said, his advice is always to be highly regarded in any and all matters of the church, not Priory, right, as a whole, and will always be regarded with significant impact. So I've tried to keep this structure as close to the early church format as possible, while at the same time incorporating a few areas that pertain directly to our situation as an internet-based church. Okay, so that's all we have to do today. I hope that was useful for you. I've tried to keep it as short as possible. Obviously, as usual, the written material for this particular video you will find as part of your course, so you can download the PDF or the Word format for that and read it through, or listen to me again if you want. Yeah, okay. Right, love you and leave you. God bless you, and we'll see you in the next episode.